This session we got Kevin Elmy he's a producer from Western Canada, and he's here to talk about systems approaches. So I'll turn it over to him.
Good afternoon.
You want this?
Oh, good. I don't have to repeat it because every once in a while, it's the afternoon talks where everybody gets a little on the tired side. We've done a lot of learning so far, and so away we go again. We're going to get outside of the box. We're going to get looking at systems approach. And, I just want to prove that, every once in a while we get the honor of stealing Jimmy Edmonds out, getting him up across the border and getting him a little more exposed to things in northern prairies. So, but the neat thing is, and once again, because of the fact that, I was able to go to Australia, I've been, working with producers down, in the southern U.S., been working with more and more producers in Eastern Canada now. All of these soil health principles that we use, they're the same everywhere. We can look for silver bullets. I wish there was that silver bullet that we can say, okay, yeah, we do this, and that's the only thing we have to do, and we have things fixed. But no, we're dealing with very, do we want to talk about complicated or complex systems? Anybody prefer complicated or complex? Is there a difference? Does it matter? But anyways, we're dealing with systems, and this is that whole thing of, if we're dealing with a system, we need to deal with solutions that are solution-based, that system-based. This is, I thought you guys would appreciate it because you just had that little bit of a storm, but in Canada we play this game of am I on the road? It's great driving down the road, and the only biggest thing is if all of a sudden you start feeling tilting, okay, maybe I'm a little left, maybe I should go a little left a little bit. So, but it's winter. Winter in North America, isn't it great? So modern agronomy, this is all this technology and these options that we have, between adding the fertilizer programs we have, the different types of biocides, the equipment, the electronics. The whole idea is it's supposed to make our lives easier and make us more productive, right? Working on ease. We need more acres, we need more bushels, we need all of that more. But what does that end up giving us? Once again, if all of these technologies we were doing, if it was all working great, then we wouldn't have any problems. Nature is usually half a step, in a lot of cases, 3 or 4 steps ahead of us. So that as we go through, we don't have the diversity, we don't have the functionality in our system, things start falling apart on us. And so whether it's compaction, salinity, biocide resistance, herbicide tolerance, I put that differentiation in there just from the standpoint of, we could have resistance to something or this tolerance. So we have to use that higher and higher rate of something to get where in the past we used to be able to use less of it. We're having weed issues, we're seeing nutrient deficiencies, we're seeing disease issues. So here's 2 samples. I was at a plot tour, and they were going to demonstrate the use of cover crops organically to control thistles. Well, the thistles grew about 2 or 3 inches high. The radishes were spindly, they were gross. So I was wondering, okay, so why isn't anything working? Even the weeds weren't happy. So I stuck the shovel in the ground and I saw this. I walked from here to the door away, so about 10 yards away. I took a shovel, stuck it into the fence line. This is what I saw. So people at the back, you really can't see it, but this left is a cement block. The right is chocolate cake. 10 yards apart. So our management, we managed to make this. Without management, we did this. Maybe there's something in our management that needs to be tweaked. So when we have all those problems, what do we respond to? We want that, once again, that easy button. So if we have compaction, well, we're going to deep rip it, right? We have improper, like sitting water. So what we'll do is we'll go out and we'll do some tile drainage. We can't kill some of these pests that we have in our system. So what do? Well, more modes of action. We do more tillage. We're not getting yield, so we're going to add fertilizer, and we're going to add more fertilizer. And once again, the wrong group to be talking to, because I think most of us, if we're here today, we're seeing that, okay, so, how do we make the system better, fertilizer-wise? We're using more fungicides. And every time we turn around, we're spending more money. And so if you're waving at them, or, okay. So the tirade I was going to go into this morning, if you listened to me babble this morning, is what a perfect system of having a long-term customer. So this time of year, we're going out and making plans. We're going to pre-buy our fertilizer. We're going to put all that fertilizer down in one pass because that's efficiency, right? Put all that fertilizer down in the first 30 days when that plant's in the vegetative stage doing its thing. How much of that fertilizer is used? 1%, 2%? Plant's this high, how much does it use? Not much. So that's 30 days. After those 30 days, what do we have to do? We have this weed flush, right? Why? Because all that nitrogen we put down is not being used. Biology is breaking it down to nitrates. It's that high nitrate in the soil, excess nitrate, is going to trigger a weed flush. So we have to go out and spray. We go out and spray. What happens to the bricks? Anybody not know what the bricks number is in a plant? If you don't know, we can talk about it. No? If not, ask me later. So the bricks drops. What happens when the bricks drops? They're going to have disease. So you go out and you spray the fungicide. What happens to the bricks? Drops. Now you get your insects. So you go out and you spray for insects. So now, are we going to have more disease? So maybe a second pass of fungicide. Okay. Now we go and harvest the crop, and we got all of this residue that has 1 or 3 shots of fungicide on it. It's going to lay on the surface. The most efficient way of the straw breakdown is fungal breakdown, saprophytic fungi. So when you have the saprophytic fungi trying to break down this residue, and this residue is full of fungicide, how does it break it down? It doesn't. So then we have to go and do some more tillage. That tillage is also going to be very detrimental for our fungal populations. So that's going to promote more bacteria, which is going to give us another spike in nitrates in the soil, which is going to make us go out and spray because we have these weeds. So what do we have for a cover crop in the fall? Well, nothing, because we had all these weeds. So a really beautiful system as for a crop input industry. When we start dealing with understanding how to get around all of this, we can get away from a lot of these inputs, especially these repeat inputs that trying to fix the same problem over and over. So we need to take a look at our system. What is the cause? And when we're looking at this cause, and once again, Dr. Beck, he alluded to it in his presentation. What is the cause? Are we treating a symptom, or are we actually finding out what the cause of a problem is? It's like the person that going to the doctor and saying, "Doctor, it hurts when I touch my head. It hurts when I touch my ribs. It hurts when I touch my leg. What's wrong? What's wrong with me? What medicine do I need?" He said, "Well, you have a broken finger." So these are the things when we look at what these problems are and the symptoms versus the cause, they may be interrelated. So, the water infiltration. Do we have poor water infiltration because we have compaction? Where does this compaction come from? Why is it caused? What is it? What is the underlying message that we're trying to get at? So, you got the spider, but what other damage did you do? So we need to understand the cause. What causes these things? And this is where, reviewing and taking a look at your system is really important. This is where, having, whether it's a mentor or a friend or a neighbor that you can trust, come over and help out. Maybe it is an outside consultant. Maybe it is, you can trick Jay Fuhr into coming out and spending the day with you, or Jimmy Evans. There's a whole bunch of great people out there that you can get out, and they'll help you out. So why did that problem? Why did it appear? And when we start looking at all of the problems, so compaction, what happens if we increased what happens if we fixed our liquid carbon cycle in our soil? Well, it'll give you better aggregation, and your compaction would disappear. What about water infiltration? Well, if you increase your liquid carbon in your system, then you're going to get better aggregation, going to get better water infiltration. Drought tolerance, erosion. When we start talking about weeds and disease, guess what? We increase our liquid carbon in our soil, they start functioning properly, and all of those things disappear. When we look at our native stands that we are not managing, just like that organic producer, that fence line, what problems did that fence line soil have? Nothing. It was functioning. We're going in and we're trying to get one up on nature. We have to try and understand what nature is actually what it's looking for to help move forward with it. So when we start looking at how do we make change, what kind of what management steps do we do that influence this problem? Is it that fall tillage? Is it the overuse of fungicides? Is it lack of diversity? Is it lack of green plants? What are we missing? Or what are we doing that's causing these issues? And then how many changes are needed? So if we're growing monocrop corn and that is our rotation, and once again, I would rather have monocrop corn over monocrop continuous canola for a lot of reasons, but that's another story. But what can we do to change? That's the reason why, if you listened to me this morning, I talked about as a simple change in systems for a few different steps. If you're growing wheat, put in 10 to 15 pounds of winter wheat in with your cereal. It's not going to vernalize. It's going to stay vegetative through the growing season. It's going to be green right up to freeze up. It will overwinter. Then you have to kind of manage it that way. But it could be as simple as that. And it checks off quite a few of these boxes that we're trying to fix. So that when we're looking, once again, for the solutions, when we're looking at, okay, so we're going to put down that winter wheat in with our wheat. Okay, so what are our actions and interactions for those solutions? What are the negatives? What is it fixing? What is it doing? Is it going to make the problem worse? Is it going to make it better? And this is where, when we start looking at, the solutions, is it going to make that problem worse? So, on Facebook, every once in a while, I lose my mind and I dive into the agronomic session where a producer will say, I got this saline spot, how do I fix it? And someone always comes in and says, put manure on your saline spots. Potentially, unless you have your manure tested, probably 9 times out of 10, it's going to make it worse. It's not going to help the system. Creating a weed environment. And what is a weed environment? A few definitions. But when we start managing, and if, for instance, we keep our fungal to bacterial ratio low, under that 0.3, that's where our pioneering weeds, our pioneering plants grow. That's where they thrive. That's where they want to be. So every time we're managing and creating a pioneering plant environment, we're going to have weeds. So we need to learn the steps to make our soil and plant succession move forward. Tillage on compacted soils. Is that going to help? Well, initially it'll help, but if that's the only thing you're going to do, it isn't going to work. So what are some of the issues, the causes of compaction? So when we're going through and looking at what causes compaction, number one, back in 2010 to 2014 in eastern Saskatchewan, we were ending up, normally we got about 8 inches of rain during our growing season. During those 4 years, we were about 40. And of course, most of that happened in May and June. I used to have lots of hair, okay, more hair. That got rid of a lot of it. So compaction issues, traffic on wet soils, lack of deep roots, over-application of nitrogen. Anybody want to stab on why over-applying nitrogen causes compaction? Bang on, both of you guys. So our C to N ratio in the soil, ideally we're going to be about that 12 to 1. When we overapply nitrogen, it's sitting in the soil, those microbes, in order to consume that nitrogen, they need to eat carbon. If we don't have carbon being supplied through root exudates or other forms of carbon, so whether it's alfalfa pellets, humates, things like that, those microbes are going to be looking for the next source of carbon, which is our soil organic matter. So as it eats it, it reduces the aggregation, it creates compaction. Over-tilling, same idea. When we do tillage, we're killing off our any plants that are growing, and we're breaking apart our soil aggregates, creating the compaction. Not enough carbon cycling. Once again, that goes to above. Bacterial-dominated soils. It's our fungi that gives us our soil structure. So as soon as we start going back to those pioneering type of stages of our soils, we have way more bacteria than we have fungi. We need to be building fungi in our soils. And then too much equipment, our axial pressure. I have a really good video that, it's a YouTube video that Odette Menard that she presented up in the piece, and she's from Eastern Canada. So she has a little bit even goofier accent than what I do. But some really great information about compaction and tires and weights. So deep ripping, this damages your fungi, promotes more bacteria, reduces your soil aggregate stability, and it'll temporarily release some calcium. Calcium in the soil will help flocculate your soil, so it makes it fluffy. The problem with it is because of our chemistry and our soil textures, it gets reabsorbed, and we get less and less of these calcium fluxes. So then it keeps going back, compacting your soils. I won't have the video. If you want the copy of this video, just contact me. This is a producer on irrigation in the Brooks, Alberta area. And I'll give you the Reader's Digest as he's going through. So he went out and he did some deep ripping, and what he did is he had his son with a liquid tank on with fish, hydrolyzed fish and humic acid, and he would do 2 passes, turn it on, do 2 passes, turn it off. And so what they found, one of the things I told him after was he needed a deep-rooted cover crop after, so even oats, throw some sunflowers in. It would have made a big difference. So over here is where he put a deep rip, so he was down about 12 inches, and you can see this is on really high magnesium soil, so really hard, and lots of compaction. So, well, that one didn't get the juice, but you can see these other ones. He's picking them up and they're just crumbling. Not great soil aggregation, but at least he's breaking up that hard pan. And so adding that humic acid and hydrolyzed fish, we're feeding that biology. That biology is now going in and breaking up the hard pan. Okay, after he finishes destroying it. So he mentioned that, this is done in the fall. He'd be concerned that if the wind started blowing, that it would start drifting on him. That's another reason why you're breaking up hard pan. It won't blow, but you do a positive, you fix that hard pan, you need to have that cover crop on top for a couple of reasons. So there he is. So this is on soybean stubble. Yes, we grow soybeans way up north. Everything good. So there he is. He's over about 40 feet. And he's just now smashing these clods together. That's just deep rip. No fungal food added to it. And this is what you'll see is you go out and you rip it, yeah, okay, you've loosened up, but you haven't fixed the problem. You've done one step. When we're adding that nitrogen and manure, we have to watch in these places that are prone to hard panning. When we're adding nitrogen, when we're adding manure, we need to have a green plant growing. It's really crucial getting that carbon going. We need to increase that plant diversity. We need to reduce the amount of tillage, as crazy as that sounds. But it's hard. We need to till. Well, guess what? We need to address the other problems. We're dealing with a symptom, not the actual cause. So we have to stop managing the way that we managed to create the problem. We need to identify the causal agents. We need to be able to, this is the YouTube, so where Dr. Menard talks about what tracks do. Tracks were used in tanks in the war. Why? For traction. They're not worried about compaction, they're worried about traction. The compaction from tracks is way higher than what you'll get from tires. And big fat tires or duals or triples, you're better off going with duals or triples, more tires per axle. So some really neat research that she'll go deeper into it than what I will. She also talks about managing load weights per axle. So once again, overloading equipment, too many pounds per tire per axle. And then getting these cover crops and watching your crop rotation. So your weeds. Weeds are another one that, once again, they are a symptom of what is going on. So if we go out and look at what they're trying to do, they're trying to fit this ecological void that we're missing. We're missing the function in our system. So nature is smart enough to help us out. And what do? We kill the weeds they're trying to fix the system. So in one of the books, so I have a couple of reading books that I highly recommend for people. And I have a GPS in this book, so if someone steals it, I'm going to track them down. This is the book, When Weeds Talk by J.L. McCammon. I'm hoping to one day meet the guy because he owes me a bunch of royalties because a lot of meetings I tell people go out and buy his book. So in this book, the three fixes that are issues. Number one, low calcium flux. And the flux is the key word because we have lots of calcium in the soil, but is it available to our plants? We can get deeper into the soil physics and soil chemistry if you want, but it's this availability is one of the keys. Excess soil nitrates. Yes, we need soil nitrates in the soil, but we are, in a lot of cases, excess. High salinity. So tillage, how long have we been tilling the ground? Been a couple of years since the first plow was developed back in the Romans or pre-Roman days. Does it work for killing weeds? Well, initially. Does it clean up something and get rid of weeds? Not so much. There is a place for surgical tillage. I was at an organic conference the one time and one guy was talking about surgical tillage and I said, tell me more. They said, okay, so if you have appendicitis, does the doctor start at your knee and hack you all the way up to your shoulder? No, that's pretty invasive, isn't it? So what they do is they make the smallest cut possible, go in, do what they have to do, and get out. This way your body will heal quicker. Our soils are very similar. So the less damage we do to it, the quicker they're going to heal. Herbicide applications. We've been using herbicides since, 1940? And the whole idea when 2,4-D was registered, the plan was when our agronomics failed, we can go and do spot treatments. Control the weeds when our agronomics failed, right? Great idea. Anybody here spot spray on the farm? Exactly. Because, we're just not using 2,4-D or MCP. We need added activity. So if we've been using herbicides for 80 years, why haven't we got rid of wild oats? Why haven't we got rid of ragweed? Why? Nature. We're not going to beat nature. So nature is going to give us a lot of different genotypes of these different weeds. She's going to end up giving us herbicide tolerance. So just look at these triggers. The When Weeds Talk, like I said, if you want to take a look at it, it's a great book, easy read once you understand. It talks about the triggers. So in order to get rid of a lot of these weeds, we increase our calcium flux, we tie up those soil nitrates, and if anybody was here last year with Dr. James White and understanding the rhizophagy part of plant nutrition, all of a sudden this becomes easier and easier. We can take steps forward. We need to allow soil succession. And how we do that is building our fungal to bacteria ratio. We need that fungi in the soil. And once again, this next talk that's coming up, it's going to be a really good learning experience. So that when we start talking about fall rye, so if anybody's in with green cover seeds, there's definitely a need and a spot for using fall rye. Absolutely. I challenge people. Why? Why do we have to use fall rye? It controls weeds. It has really good drought tolerance, has salinity tolerance, winter hardiness, inexpensive. It seeds here. And with a corn-soy rotation, adding a cool season grass, because we're dealing with a warm season annual grass, a warm season legume, so you throw a cool season grass in there, well, that's added diversity. You throw a brassica in there, well, that's added diversity. We're adding different functional plant groups, so that's great. But the allelopathy will limit the number of functional plant groups that we can put in when we're seeding that fall rye. There's ways around it. I've done it. It works. But it's management. So when we look at the brassicas, your turnips, radish, collards, your broadleaves, your sunflowers, buckwheat, your forbs, plantain, chicory, phacelia, we start throwing those into these mixes, we get some really neat things happening. So can we use some winter wheat, winter triticale? Can we use some perennial ryegrass? I was talking about some festiolium earlier this afternoon, and it was festiolium. What's that? So it's a ryegrass fescue cross. So it will, it's a short-term perennial crop, relatively cheap, but it does some really good funky things to our soils. So we have some options. The big question is, why is there always weed pressure? Why do we have that? Why do we need to use that fall rye to kill our weeds? What's triggering those weeds to grow? And I get it. When you're growing corn, you never want to be starving your corn on nutrients because it's costing you money. But we were talking prior to starting about using melted 4600, doing a foliar application of that. It's 4.2 times more effective putting urea through the leaf than putting it in the ground. Urea is really important to stress because if you use 2800, 1/3 of that is nitrate. Nitrate going through the leaf, take a step back. With a plant, a positive cation, the plants can regulate how much a positive cation they're taking up. An anion, they cannot. It passes through. It's a smaller molecule. It's the way the proton pumps work and everything else. But when we have nitrate, we do a foliar application. If you want one of the best plant killers out there as a spray, get some nitrate, melt it down, or 2800, spray that on your crop. You want to kill a crop quick, that's the way you do it. The plant's going to take up that nitrate. The nitrate's a toxin to the plant, and so the way that it survives high nitrates is by absorbing more water. When it absorbs more water, The solution to pollution is dilution. So it's trying to dilute and break down that nitrate, get it back into a positive form, into amino acids, into protein. When we have that free nitrate in the plant, it's reducing the amount of drought tolerance that plant actually has, because it's now using water. And when we add nitrogen to crops, how does it grow fast or slow after you've added some nitrogen? It grows fast. So lots of vegetative growth. It's using water, and if you have some drought stress, guess what? That plant has used all this water to detoxify and give vegetative growth. Your yields are going to drop because you've lost drought tolerance of that plant. So when we use melted 46, it's positive. It goes on the leaf. The plant can then identify whether it needs to take up nitrogen or not. It's smart enough to do that. If it doesn't need it, it then rolls off the leaf, lands on the ground, and does its thing. Because we're working with this 4.2 times efficiency in the system, now we're not putting down. So if we put 10 pounds, take another step back. I do a lot of backstepping. When we properly melt 4600 in water, it'll make an 1800 blend, 18 pounds or 18% nitrogen. So when we're adding 10 pounds of nitrogen this way, so about 5 gallons, that's the same as adding 40 into the soil. So that when the speaker two sessions ago, they were talking about the amount of nitrogen used to produce 1 bushel of corn. Well, this is when we get down to 0.3. This is where you start making money. So there's these ways of reducing the amount of nitrogen we're putting down. We want to manage that manure applications. We want to be able to spread it over more acres. It's really efficient for the spreaders to go out and put 20,000 gallons an acre on, but what is that doing to our nutrient cycle? What is that doing to our system? One of the things, deal with a Hutterick colony in west central Saskatchewan. He said, have soil tests here. Could you take a look at them? I said, yeah, okay. Looked at them, and I said, so tell me a story. He said, well, the 2 fields, there was 30 pounds of nitrogen in the soil, and this other one had 80. I said, okay, tell me a story. What'd you do? Well, these 2 fields were barley silage. They silaged it, spread the manure. This one was a cover crop. They silaged it. It was still green. Then they spread the manure. I said, well, your cover crop just made you 50 extra pounds of nitrogen. Because we had that green growing plant, it absorbed those nutrients, cycled those nutrients, kept it in the system instead of having dead stubble and it just, whether getting blasted off or leaching away. I'm coming this far because I don't want to stand close to the speaker and get blasted. If you're wondering why I'm coming over so far. So it isn't just the fact that, it's you guys, this is what you have to change. This is us in the, 2000? We had black soils, we had high tillage, but I was seeing wrong things happening on our soils. So, why there was always this weed pressure? Bare soil. Nature hates bare soil. It wants to be covered. And so this is where that really cover crop really works well. So it's growing under your cash crop, you take your cash crop off, and this green plant keeps on growing right up until freeze up or overwinters. Your call, depending on what species you use. We have a lack of functional plant families. So once again, are we going out and are we using 1 or 2 crops in rotation? How many more species can we implement into these using shoulder season cover crops? We have anaerobic conditions. Once again, compaction. How do we fix it? How do we address that? What steps do we have to do to make it work? Salinity. Anybody here with salinity? Oh, awesome. Oh, one person. Okay, we'll talk after. We'll set up a system. What is that? What's the trigger on salinity? How do we fix it? How do we address it? And yes, there are different modes of action of how salinity comes up. Is it a seep? Is it just what? But there's strategies we can do, management steps that we can get through to attack and reclaim these saline areas. Low microbial activity. once again, the next talk, using the compost, using, this microbial system. At first, I didn't know where compost fit. I didn't know, did it work, didn't it work? How do we use it? How do we... Spending 3 weeks with Haggerty's from Australia opened my eyes. It really made sense on how and when we can start jump-starting this system. And once again, Christine Jones, she said, when we get into this, what we really need to do is get rid of fungicide out of our system. If we are fungi deficient in our system, why are we killing it? Well, it's because we have disease, right? Fungal diseases. Why are the fungal diseases there? Because we don't have enough microbial activity of the good guys, good gals in our system to help balance the disease. Disease is just an indication that we have low diversity, low activity of our microbes in our soil. So we need to kick that into that higher rate. Once again, talking to the group, reducing tillage, probably fairly easy. This keeping roots, living root in the soil is crucial. Even if you think it's too dry. Ask Jimmy about his trial where he seeded a post-harvest cover crop and he ran out with half an acre left. They came out and did testing, and they initially said in the top foot where there was no cover crop, it had way more moisture than where the cover crop was. They dug down 4 feet, whoops, there was twice the moisture where the cover crop was as compared to where the bare soil was. So there's these really neat things that keep going through that when we say it's too dry, it dries out the soil. Once again, we have to take a look to see where those thoughts are coming from. So the biocides can work. There is a place for them, but not when they're in isolation. We need to really understand the system. We need to understand that, okay, the symptom. What is that symptom? What's causing that symptom? And then when we break it down to that next step, okay, so this is what's causing it. But is there something else causing that? What steps are being taken in the system that are driving us to this end result? It's confusing, it's going to be frustrating, it's going to be, so as we go through, it's going to be, this is what it is, this is what we're going to do, and it doesn't get better, or worse, it gets worse. Now what? There's a bunch of smart people at this conference in this room. Ask questions. And that's the great thing about this regenerative group. In, shall we say, the conventional world, everybody has a recipe and they're very secretive of what they're doing. In the regenerative group, when we start asking these questions, people are going to help. I find it's really amazing how that system really is very supportive. So addressing these triggers, we need to change management. The old management caused the problem. What do we have to do differently to find a solution? This is a great slide that I got when I attended a Terry McCosker presentation in Australia. Quite complicated. So at the back, you probably can't see it. But how do we cross this bridge of changing management? So we need to build foundations and support. So we want to reduce the amount of harm. So this is, fairly general. If you want to come closer and grab pictures, go ahead. I'll stay out of the way. You're good? And if anybody wants a copy of my presentation, just send me an email or get a hold of the people here. Well, plus it's going to be recorded, so it's going to be golden. So reduce harm. And this is, goes for life. If something is harmful, stop doing it. We want to add and feed the biology. We need to have these multi-species cover crops growing, adding fulvic acid to glyphosate and reduce the amount of glyphosate that's being used. If you haven't done research on fulvic acid, do it. Fulvic acid, one of the things, the claim to fame of fulvic acid is it reduces it increases cell wall permeability by 30 to 60%. What does that mean? 30 to 60% more product can go through the leaf. Think of what that does. You always do a jar test when you're using chemicals, but fulvic acid is one of those hidden little treasures that people need to know. Foliar feed nitrogen and your carbon. What does that mean? Once again, get carbon, whether it's molasses, whether it's straight sugar, whether it's fulvic acid, humic, get that carbon going to keep it going. Take a look at your sap analysis versus your soil sample analysis. Just saw a report from one of the people I work with. They actually did that. And the soil showed deficient, but the plant had sufficient. How does that work? When you start adding more and more biology, you'll see more of that because of between rhizophagy and the other good things that biology is doing. We need the ground cover. We need to have a variety selection of what are we using in our rotation. What crops? Machinery selection. And this is going back to Dr. Menard. What are we using for moving across the field? How much compaction? What kind of issues does that cause? When we're seeding, how much disturbance is there? What is that doing to our biology? And then when we start talking about the outcomes, the weed control, do as needed. Once again, if these weeds keep coming back, what is that weed telling you? And if it keeps coming back, I'm married. My wife will tell me 3 or 4 times to do something, and eventually I will get to it. But if I did it the first time, she probably wouldn't have to keep telling me. And so this is where these weeds, this is what they're there. They're telling us something. We need to identify what they're telling us, and we have to, it isn't these ears, but it's our biological, our systems approach ears that we have to be listening with. So as this happens, we get things going, we get things functioning. We're going to see less and less pests. We see less and less disease. On the farm, we didn't buy any nitrogen on our farm for the last 15 years. We farmed. Didn't have to. Figured out how to get that nitrogen into the soil without having to go and buy it. I earned it. Between throwing the livestock through, by having legumes in rotation and cover crops, got rid of that. Because we didn't have an over application of nitrogen, we didn't get nitrates, guess what? We didn't have insects, we didn't have pests. We get our Brix level of our plants up above 12, farming is easy. We don't have bugs, we don't have disease. Our plants mature properly. It just, the whole system works properly. Our pH, where's the pH of the soils in the area?
All over the board.
Okay.
All over.
Yeah.
I mean, anywhere from 4 to above 7.
Okay. So when we start talking, and this is where Jeff's, I don't know if you'll talk about it right away, but when we have lots of bacterial slimes are extremely high in pH. So that's going to drive our pH that way. When we have, we don't have those slimes, our pH starts to drop. It just really, really interesting how we can change the pH. The other interesting little story, how are we doing for time? That's 20 minutes. 10 minutes. One of the things I did, I worked for a soil testing company in Western Canada, and I went out and I grabbed some soil samples for one of our neighbors, got home, sent them away. The next day, a foot of snow. Okay, soil sampling's done. Got the results back. Soil tests look goofy. I said, okay, I'm going to resample these because these numbers I don't believe. Went back in the spring. It was GPS benchmark, so I drove up. There's the hole. Okay, dig a hole right beside it. Sent the sample in, and I requested the pH to be sent in the fall, and I wanted the pH in the spring because I thought, this is going to be an interesting test. In the fall, the pH was at 7.4. In the spring, pH was 5.9. Same spot. So in the fall, it was dry. That drives the pH up. In the spring, snow left, good moisture, biology was going, giving off organic acids as the plant material was breaking down. Organic acids, pH dropped. So then when we start talking about the plant roots, if you go micron by micron along the root, pH will go from 2 to 13 by the micron. So the pH part, if we get out of the way, and allow that soil to heal, pH will go to neutral, almost guaranteed. Haggerty's, Western Australia. Their neighbors, their pHs are in that 4 range. Haggerty's on 65,000 acres are running a pH of 6.2, 6.4, right across the fence. A pH change of 2 is a really big change. Why? Because their biology will get them to neutral or close to neutral. Then you know things are working. You see more carbon and water infiltration. You see more nutrient density. You have more minerals available, so that this way on your tissue test you'll see them elevated. You'll see your soils being softer. I was up in the Dauphin, Manitoba area, and going out and digging. Guys been silaging off a piece for the last 8 years. No synthetics, high diversity, green plants growing. With my shovel, I leaned on it and I went down 10 inches into the soil. I said, this is a picture postcard of where we need to be. There's been places I've jumped on shovels and they've gone less than a 1/4 inch into the ground. I have broken so many wooden shovels. I went to fiberglass. I started snapping fiberglass shovels because I was getting in there reefing on it. So I've gone to metal handled shovels now because the stuff I'm seeing is not pretty. As we get going and we have all these things going, our financial risk drops. And once again, the talk on the financials, beautiful talk. And then in Australia they've been doing carbon trading. So there is my systems approach. Did I give you any recipes? No. Will I give tips? Yes. Will I go through and give blanket? No. Everybody has a different system. Your seeder is different, your rotation is different, your soils are different, your climate is different. Where are you starting? Are you starting on what I would call good, healthy, active soils? Or are we been degraded down to the point where we're that old engine needs to get rebuilt? I don't know. But we can go through and once again, my whole goal as a consultant is, my goal is I want to work with you for 3 years. On that 3rd year, I've changed your thinking. I've trained you how to think regeneratively. And in year 4, you don't need me. Unless you pick up more land, unless you change crops, unless something comes up. The whole thing is your power observation. What are you doing? Your critical thinking, looking at your system, creating a system that is going to continue to work. Instead of you writing, well, what is Gabe's line? I like signing the backs of the check, not the front of the check. And the whole theory is we have functioning soils. When we don't have function, we have something that's dysfunctional, we need to work on it. Once again, we in agriculture are growing crops and we're fighting to keep this crop alive. Whereas the weeds are doing really well and we're fighting to kill them. So we're fighting. We need to observe, we need to take notice of what's happening, how things are happening in our soils, and then we come up with some solutions. Yes, sir?
Explain to me a little more about what does melted urea mean? Explain the concept melted urea.
Okay, so with urea, oh, by the way, if you ever want to cool down beer real quick, you get a little bit of 4600, you put it in water and you put your beer in there. It's an endothermic reaction, so there'll be frost everywhere. It doesn't matter what temperature is outside, it's going to get cold. So there's a party trick. So the quick rule of thumb is 800 or 2 tons of urea into 800 gallons of water. You circulate it for about 15 minutes, and it makes a true solution of 1800. If you don't put enough urea in, because who has a scale and can measure out 2,000 or 4,000 pounds? So you put it in, you circulate it, and if it doesn't all dissolve, that means you're at maximum solubility of that. So now you're at 1800. If it all dissolves, were you 200 pounds short? Were you 50 pounds short? So you're going to be less than 1800. But now we have that urea in a true solution, so it's not going to salt out until you get down to, I'm doing the math, about 25 Fahrenheit, and then it may salt out. If it does salt out, you just hook up the pump, circulate it again, it redissolves. So it's not a waste, so it does store well. So because it's in the urea form, when we spray it on a plant leaf, it's a positive ion. That positive ion, when it lands on the plant leaf, that plant has the ability to decide whether it wants to keep it or not. Does it need it? If it needs it, it absorbs it. And the nice thing, because it's positive, it goes straight to amino acids and protein production. When we have nitrate in the soil, or nitrate in the plant, it has to go through 5 steps to get to amino acid. Those 5 steps, because you're ripping off oxygen off of that nitrogen, is really expensive energy-wise for that plant. So when we have nitrate in the plant, it's absorbing water, it's stripping that oxygen off. What does that yield? What does that energy cost you? It costs you yield. So having that positive ion landing on the plant, deciding if it needs it, absorbs it, straight to amino acid. If it doesn't need it, it rolls off, lands onto the soil, and now you're not going to see this huge nitrogen spike because we're not putting 40 pounds onto the ground, we're only maybe putting 10.
What was your mix again?
So it was 2 tons into 800 gallons of water. If you go to YouTube and you do a search on melted urea and look up Patrick Fabian, he gives you the full recipe. But it was about 4,000 pounds into 800 gallons. Hands.
It's about melted urea.
Okay, melted.
Are there conditions that works better in? Are there conditions that melted urea works better in so you don't burn the leaf surface, or, early morning, or that?
So the carbon is going to be number 1. If you throw a little bit of fulvic acid into it, good. But because it's not urea, so if you put 28001, a third of that's nitrate, it's going to absorb it, you're going to burn it. Urea will not burn unless you put on 25 gallons of straight product, you may get that burn. But the whole idea is it's really safe on that leaf.
So on the pH.
So you're like the 3rd person I've heard talk about the pH roller coaster. Why the hell are we even checking it then? And making decisions based on a 1 snapshot.
Yeah, exactly. Like for me, hate is a strong word, but I got a few hates in my life. Adding free lime or gypsum to the soil. If you look up the Mulder cycle, and when you add free nutrients like lime and you're adding 3 tons an acre, what that does to soil chemistry, like the question was about the phosphate in my last talk, when you throw lime, like calcium sulfate or whatever, especially calcium, if you had a cow that died and you buried it and you dug it up 5 years later, what do you have? What's left? Bones. What is bones? What are the constituents? Calcium phosphate. Really, really strong bond. So when we have a functioning system and we're not adding the lime, okay, yeah, that phosphate is locked up, but biologically we can get it. When we have bones laying in the ground, it's there for a long, long time. So when we start talking about pH, I would then look at the biology. Where is my biology? What is stopping my biology from balancing my soils? And so we may have to go in and use some amendments, but if it's 3 tons And believe me, the fertilizer tests I'm starting to see in Western Canada, where we have normally relatively high pH and lots of calcium down below, now we're starting to see this lime recommendation. Drives me nuts. So leverage it, take a look to see where we're at biologically. So maybe send away, do a biological test.
You're seeing those recommendations here too.
Yeah, exactly. And so what is happening in our soils? When we look at these soil health tests that are coming out, a lot of them are not based on biological, they're just looking at ratios. So yeah, that's going to be part of it. But once again, looking at Haggerty's, when Haggerty's were going out, they're doing soil samples, they're doing sap testing, they're doing tissue testing. Oh, we're low in magnesium. We're going to go out and add magnesium. They come back and they tissue test again, and guess what? Magnesium's good, but potassium's low, so they add potassium. Okay, got it fixed. Go back, test again. Now they're low in sulfur. They're always chasing. As soon as they went to compost on the seed, compost extract in furrow, and a foliar, everything, when they did tissue tests, everything was perfect. Biology knows what to do. Had one group ask me about, what about adding some carboxylic acid? I said, well, how much do you add? Well, I don't know. What happens if you add too much? I don't know. What happens if you add not enough? I don't know. I said, well, why are we trying to go and micromanage instead of letting the biology do it themselves? They know what they need. They know what they want. They know how to do it. So there's a lot of those things that, it's tough. How do we speed it up? That's above my pay scale, but maybe the next speaker will be able to help us out. Yeah.
If a person doesn't want to get set up to melt with their own urea, is DEF a replacement, a quick, easy replacement?
Yeah, guess what it is? DEF is melted 4600. So, way cheaper. Way cheaper doing it yourself, and it's easy. Like, you can do a lot of gallons in a short period of time if you have the right tools. So, yeah.
What do you think about seed treatments on the seed, the commercial ones?
The chemical?
Yes.
Okay, back to my Christine Jones stories. She said that's the first thing you get rid of. When you go through and you look at what the biology, where it starts, you listen to John Kempf, another great example. A lot of respect for John. And he said the highest rate of return on investment on any biological is on the seed. As soon as you put a fungicide seed treatment on, mycorrhizae fungi. As soon as, if you're, I did some research on it, and I was playing around with, when I was growing soybeans, the company said, well, how much phosphate I'm putting down? I said, none. I said, well, try, because, soybeans need a lot of phosphate. I did some trials with it, zero response. So, on to Google Scholar, did some digging, and if you have high mycorrhizae functioning in your soil and in your soybeans, you will not see a phosphate yield response. And once again, that's a 30 bushel crop, which it's not a 60 or 70 that is probably in this room, but this is that whole thing of when we have that biology and we don't have the seed treatment on, we don't have the fertilizer in row, we get our biology going. Haggerty's, let's go back to Haggerty's. I asked them how many of their neighbors, and with 65,000 acres, they have some neighbors, how many of them have asked questions or tried what they're doing? They said, to date, over 24 years, the next one will be the first one. And that's what I said. Okay, that sounds like back home when I was doing it too. But they said, okay, so they go out, neighbors go out, they put down their fertilizer, their crop pops up nice and green, nice rows, nice quick. Biological system, they have the compost, the extract, it takes a little bit of time. So, their plants slowly come out of the ground. They're not a dark green, but they're healthy. And so they're 5 days behind the chemical side. When the wheels start falling off on the chemical side because they don't have the biology in conjunction with these growing plants, those neighbors, their bricks drop, they get disease, they get bugs, so they're out in their sprayer. They don't have time to look over the fence to see what Haggerty's are doing because they're trying to keep these plants alive. Once again, we're fighting to keep some plants alive, and we're trying to kill these other weeds that won't stop growing. So when we go through and we see that system, which one do you want? This nice dark green that pops up real quick, or this slow growing, I don't want to say lime green, but lighter green, slow growing crop? Whereas as soon as, as these people are out trying to keep their wheat crop alive, Haggerty's crop is growing along and they're not needing to add anything because their tissue test, their sap test, perfect. Not perfect, but within shouting range of being completely functional. So it's really interesting when you see this functioning system. And so this is that whole rhizosphere. Like I said, if Jeff doesn't have books, get on Amazon or whatever, and there's the teaming with series, really easy read. And well, a shameless plug. And I do have some more of my books here if anybody is looking at doing some out of the box reading. So, any other questions? Because I think we're getting close to time. One last question.
Well, I was just had a question about finding naked seed or untreated seed. I have a friend that's a dealer, and I've been getting untreated corn seed, and he said it's getting really hard to find.
Yeah, that's that kind of tells you that where they make money. So it's for getting bare seed. Book early. The earlier you book, the less reasons why they can't. And guess what? In the spring, you may get treated seed anyways because they forgot, they ran out, whatever. So yeah, make sure you're talking to your retail early in the season. Get lined up, and it may be. Yeah, it's just going to be something where we can, as we get further down the line, we're going to see more options. We might even get to the point where we can have a biological dressing on it. We're not there yet. And there's some seed retails that I don't get invited to meetings anymore because I'm talking about bare seed. Bare seed, and once again, I used to treat seed. I'm guilty until I realized what I was doing. Have a great picture of when I cleaned out my Cruiser Max on my alfalfa field. Nothing grew there for 10 years. So it gives me a really good indication of the damage that can happen. So, okay, thank you very much. We have